Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about the changes to the Elemental Shaman tier set in 10.2 and Season 3 of Dragonflight. So the old 4-piece is out. It was very lackluster. It didn't do anything for the builds that we were using on PTR that were giving us the best results, which are these Further Beyond builds, which are absolutely awful to play, but they are what has been best performing so far. And unfortunately, this new tier set isn't doing anything to change that, and if anything, is making it more powerful. And something I said in the middle of my last video was, I basically thought if anyone thought that the Further Beyond builds were going to get stronger, that they were crazy, and I have to apologize to all of those people who thought it was going to get stronger, because this is making it just that much harder to get away from those permanent Ascendance builds, and we'll get into why in just a second. So basically, this is a big, robust 4-set, and a lot of people were really excited about it when it was first dropped, because it is just a better designed one, objectively, than what the previous 4-set was. Much more thematic and based around Primordial Wave, which is what our 2-set is based off around as well. But the more testing we've done with it, the more problems that have kind of arisen, and I'm sure some of you are already aware of them, but we'll get into it in just a second. So I'm going to break this up into two different sections. I'm going to talk about single target first, and then we'll talk about AoE second, and we'll kind of focus on each one of them separately. So for single target by itself, only this first part plays into it. So let's just break it down a little bit. So when consuming Primordial Wave, and for 10 seconds afterward, a lava burst burns your target for 25% additional damage over 4 seconds. So that the other part just only plays into it in AoE. So we're going to just start with just this and take it with bite-size approach. So what this does is every lava burst applies a dot that stacks every single time you press lava burst. It doesn't just like reapply the damage and keep reapplying it over and over again. It's rolling this dot much like a mage's ignite, and making that dot bigger and bigger and bigger, doing more and more damage for every lava burst that you press. Now, if you think about that, that means that this tier set is really complementing any build that presses lava burst a lot, which is the Further Beyond build, which means that the build that's going to get the most out of this is going to be these permanent Ascendance lava burst builds, because they're always going to be able to get the largest dot going from it. That doesn't necessarily mean that another build might come along that is just better, with more tuning and other changes to follow, but it does mean that a permanent Ascendance or a lava burst focused build is going to be what's getting the most out of this portion of the tier set. So yes, Further Beyond builds have gotten buffed up, which is just kind of beyond me, but that is where we are at right now. So in order to really hammer it home, because since I haven't talked about it in this video, we did do some testing on Thursday and Friday of new bosses with this tier set, but obviously this isn't changing like your playstyle at all. It just kind of happens in the background and allows you to do more damage. So I do want to talk about the Further Beyond builds just a little bit more, and we're just going to use this log here, which was, it was a wipe, but it was a very deep wipe, and it really helps exemplify the issues with the Further Beyond builds, and I do want to talk about it just a bit here. So here you can see at the end of the poll, I was doing the most damage, but obviously people are dying around this point. So we're going to kind of break it down into the important parts that I want to highlight here. So we'll go into my buffs here, and you'll notice that under Ascendance, I was in Ascendance one time, because I was able to extend it from the second it triggered all the way basically until we started to wipe here at the end and people started to die off. So a 76% uptime, but you'll notice there's this huge gap right at the beginning of the fight where I did not trigger Ascendance. And this is one of the biggest issues about Further Beyond builds, especially ones based around DRE, and why they're so problematic. So some people have claimed that it's hyperbole, like outside of Ascendance, you're not actually doing tank damage. But if you look, and I guess I'll have to point that out again, if you look at where I entered Ascendance, I entered Ascendance at 59 seconds into the fight. So just to really put that into perspective, all of Bloodlust had already ended. I got 0 good usage out of Bloodlust, and it wasn't until a minute into the fight that I actually started being able to do okay damage. Good damage, but okay damage. You have to keep in mind that Ascendance is not a burst cooldown. It just allows you to do, basically allows you to do a different type of steady damage. You're not really bursting for Ascendance. It just goes. And you just do more damage during that period of time. So if we go back to the whole thing here for everybody, over the period of time that included Ascendance, that first 59 seconds of the fight, I am basically doing tank damage. This is a huge problem, because if we are using DRE further beyond builds, which is right now has the highest potential for damage, if it's just not proccing, if you can't get into Ascendance, then you're just doing no damage at all. On the other side of things, once it does proc, and if we go from, like, let's just call it 59 seconds where it did proc, and then we'll do it right here where damage was peaked right before it started falling off and people start dying, just so we're not like getting a misrepresenting the damage. We're doing much more damage comparatively to everyone else currently on PTR, and again, things are going to change, but you can tell the difference between this number here and then this number here, 134 versus 102. And this 102 was over half of that period of time had Bloodlust, and I was doing less damage. That kind of gulf is just not good for the game when it comes to my playstyle not changing at all. Like, I'm not doing anything differently here. I just have less buttons. I have less lava bursts to press because I don't have the permanent Ascendance. And even once it procced, yes, I was doing more damage than anyone else, but it's not like I flew up the rankings as that happened. Even like 3 minutes into the fight, I was still way down here as I was slowly clawing my way up. So it's just, even if you're able to maintain permanent Ascendance with DRE, you cannot control when it procs. And there's one of the new fights that came out, the second to last boss, has a shield that you have to break off of him after you land from your dragon flying. You have to land, you have to go up to him and start attacking the shield and break it before he finishes a cast. And if you don't, then you wipe the raid. If you're using a DRE focused build, then you literally can't even get your damage started unless you get lucky and you do get that to proc. Now, obviously, you can still use the Ascendance, the actual button Ascendance, but you are doing less damage than you would be doing with a DRE build, as long as it procs reliably. So there's just a whole lot of issues with this further beyond build. I really do think that this is something that they need to address, as well as just the fact you're only pressing essentially 2 buttons. It's not fun, it's not mobile, and it's just, it feels lacking because you don't, even if you're able to maintain it, it's not like you're doing some sort of like crazy amount of damage. It's not actually a burst window. It's just more consistent damage. It's just a higher version of that consistent damage. But like I said, when you are able to get into Ascendance and maintain it, like I said, that Molten Slag damage is at least something. So going back to that tier piece, that 2-piece, 7% damage versus 0% damage, this is definitely a buff overall. And like I said, I have seen it get even higher than that. So that's pretty much for the single target. Again, the play style, again, I don't really have any problem so much with the tier set. It's fine. It's not really like you're interacting with it at all in a single target situation, but it at least works with what it's trying to push us in the direction of. I just don't like the fact that the direction is into such a unstable and unfun build, at least for me personally. If you really like Ascendance and just staying in Ascendance permanently, then sure, but just note that once we get around to the tuning phase of this, I highly doubt we're going to be able to, especially if they're planning for us to be permanently Ascendant in Ascendance. It's not like we're going to be doing this, like, you know, we're not going to be doing crazy amount of damage with this ever. So I just see this as a huge problem. It's really unfun. It's immobile, and whatever button you have attached to Lava Burst, that button is going to be clear of any kind of text. If you have it on like a number button, you're not going to see that number after a couple days because you're just going to be slamming it over and over again. And as I've said before as well, once you get into Ascendance, if you really wanted to, you could basically turn your entire rotation into a 1-button macro. So if that's something that's really interesting, then you know, power to you. But for me personally, that is just really, really unfun and makes the whole process of playing the game almost just like a level of tedium and frustration. So that's pretty much what I have to say for single target. And now we'll go ahead and get into the AoE portion of things next. All right, so back to the tier set again, and now we'll talk about that second part of the tier set. So for 10 seconds, and that's for 10 seconds after triggering Primordial Wave, each cast of Chain Lightning causes your next Lava Burst to hit up to 3 additional targets affected by your Flame Shock for 100% of normal damage. So what this does is you essentially want to trigger your Primordial Wave, and then just go back and forth between Chain Lightning and Lava Burst, Chain Lightning, Lava Burst, Chain Lightning, Lava Burst, over and over again to constantly get that 3 target cleave from those lava bursts, which is really crazy how much damage you can get out of those two things going back to back. Now, the issues there's plenty of issues with this. So first off, let's just talk about everything that this does for this 10-second window. So every single one of these additional lava bursts are also affected by this first part of the tier set as well. So every single lava burst is getting this 25% additional damage dot on every single target that is being hit. In addition to that, and the fact that it also ignites. In addition to that, every single additional lava burst created from this will also work with Rolling Magma, which is the talent that reduces the cooldown on Primordial Wave by 1 second for each time that a lava burst is cast, which means what you can effectively do is go Chain Lightning, Lava Burst, Chain Lightning, Lava Burst, Chain Lightning, Lava Burst, and essentially have completely refunded the cooldown of Primordial Wave to do the whole thing over again. So just to make sure that we're clear on that, we'll jump over to the PTR real quick. And what that would look like is you would spread your Flame Shocks, you would get as many as you can. We'll just do 5 right now. And you can go Lava Burst, Chain Lightning, 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 Lava Burst. And then again, you can spread your Flame Shocks and do the whole thing again, going back and forth between, in this case, Lava Beam and Chain Lightning. And look, it's back off cooldown again. I can go ahead and do it again. Chain Lightning, Lava Burst, 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 and then I can do it again. And I can basically keep that going permanently without ever having to do anything else. It's just Chain Lightning and Lava Burst until you get your Primordial Wave back off cooldown, and then you're just doing that all over again, and you're triggering that back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So you might be thinking, well, what about Earthquake? Where does Earthquake factor into this? That is what I've been trying to figure out over the past weekend, is I've been trying to figure out where that functions in this build. How many is too many? Is there a certain amount that you should be aiming for with your primordial, or with this tier set triggering back and forth? Should you be fitting in a lava or an earthquake in this 10-second window? Because every single time that you're casting an earthquake, it's taking the place of either a Chain Lightning or a Lava Burst that you could have gotten out, that then feeds back into the 4-piece and the reduction and the Rolling Magma and everything that synergizes with this. Earthquake just doesn't synergize with this tier set at all. And the other problem with Earthquake is it just doesn't do any real damage. In Season 1, we had a tier set that buffed up Earthquake every time you cast basically any other ability. It was like Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning and Lava Burst. Every single cast it, you'd get a 5% stacking buff for any of your spenders, including Earthquake, and now we just don't have that. And there is not a single fire build that uses Echo of the Elements, or not Echo of the Elements, but Echoes of the Great Sunring, sorry about that, so that we're not getting that buff either. So Earthquake just doesn't have a place in this 10-second window, and like I've already shown, you basically can keep that 10-second rolling permanently in an AoE situation. So as people have begun to find out this week, you don't even need to cast Earthquake anymore, because 1, it just doesn't do any damage, and 2, it doesn't synergize at all with the 4-piece set. So I've been trying to force it in there over the weekend, and the second you stop trying to do that, it just functions so much better. So people are running a standard Wildfire build, and then just going back and forth between Chain Lightning and Lava Burst, Chain Lightning and Lava Burst, Chain Lightning and Lava Burst, and that's it. And so we have gone from having a 2-button spec in single target to also having a 2-button spec in AoE. Now, I'm not saying that it doesn't do good damage. It's just a very incomplete spec right now, and is not, well, that's the thing. It's going to depend on your personal opinions here. I don't find it fun to play. It's not very engaging to me. But if you like seeing a whole lot of Lava Bursts and Chain Lightnings going off and just mayhem going everywhere, then sure, I can see it from a flavor perspective and from a visual perspective, because Elemental has always been a visual treat of the senses, but it just doesn't play in a fun way. I'm not saying that AoE needs to be something complicated. I mean, like, look at right now, lightning is basically just chain lightning, elemental blast, chain lightning, and earthquake. But this isn't using spinders at all. We are basically ignoring a big part of the builder spinner class archetype that we have, and we're just completely ignoring it for AoE. So that just becomes another huge issue. I think this is, again, an oversight on Blizzard's part, and we will see more additional changes in the future. I can't believe that we will stay in this shape, but I also don't know how they're going to fix it to make it work with Earthquake without them just like buffing Earthquake through the roof. So maybe we'll see that. I think that'd be one easy fix to it. Again, yeah, that's just kind of where we are, just chain lightning and lava burst and ignoring earthquake. The other big point that I have to really bring up again, that I brought up in the other video, but I'll say it again here, is that if we're in these situations where we're having to choose between two builds, and who knows what we're going to end up with, but if we're having to do like a wildfire build in AoE, where we're constantly going back and forth between chain lightning and lava burst, and then having to do a further beyond build for single target, for raids and stuff like that, we're going to end up in a situation again like in Season 1 where our single target is just super fallen behind in a Mythic Plus environment. So hopefully there's a lot of things that need to change. Like I said, and again, I said this in the last video too, I made a video about all the issues that I had with Elemental in Season 1, and they're all about fire. They're all revolved around the interconnectivity of the fire talents and how the bottom of the elemental tree, I think has more talents than any other class, and it's just so bottom heavy and has an entire row of 2 talent point talents that just block off a lot of our capstones, which makes it very difficult to mix and match capstones and have a more interactive, not have this split up playstyle where you're either playing lightning or playing fire. And I know that some people prefer to play one or the other, but I've always been a big fan of the marriage between those two. We're elemental shamans, we're not fire shamans, we're not lightning shamans. We're elemental shamans. We should be able to use all of the elements at our fingertips if we want to, without feeling like it's just like a hindrance, or like, oh no, now I have to press lightning bolt because I have nothing else, and now lightning bolt doesn't do any damage because I didn't take any of the lightning talents. Stuff like that just shouldn't happen, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion. And now I think I'm kind of rambling on it, so I think I'll end it there. It needs some work. It needs some work. I think, to give credit where credit is due, I think that this is definitely a much better design than what we had before. It's very thematic. It does push the Primordial Wave gameplay. I just really think that there's some bigger issues here going on, and there's a lot of tuning that needs to be done, and some big fixes to the elemental talent tree that I don't know if we'll see in time for 10.2. I'm very, very worried we'll go live with a further beyond build for raid. It's not something that I'm interested in playing, and it's something that could easily be putting you in a position to do terrible damage if you let yourself fall out of Ascendance. And one thing I didn't mention in this, but yes, like I said, you can play with the Ascendance button in single target, and you probably will have to for certain fights that have damage windows, or like I said on that second to last boss, Tindril, I believe his name is. It does less damage than the DRE version by at least a hefty amount, just because you're not getting those DRE procs, but it does allow you to control when you go into Ascendance, but it's even tighter to stay in Ascendance because of the fact you're not getting those additional extensions from deeply rooted elements. So I don't know. There's a whole lot of issues that they never fixed coming out of Season 1 that are still there in the talent tree. So we'll have to wait and see. I'm not going to start dooming yet. It's too early for me to start dooming. I'll reserve the right to do that later. But until then, we'll try to stay up to date. Hopefully, I won't take as long to get these videos out in the future. I was just getting a little bit behind, and yeah, it happens sometimes. But I will be streaming all of the raid testing for the remainder, or hopefully for the remainder of the raid testing. So I will be back on Thursday and Friday for those raid testing. Those are the first ones that we are doing on Mythic, which is I believe the first 4 bosses. So if you're interested in that, feel free to give me a follow at twitch.tv/ridmark. And I also have a Discord if you want to ask me any personal questions about the spec or the YouTube channel or the Twitch stream. But if you really want to keep your ear to the ground about all the changes and the discussion going on around Elemental Shaman, feel free to join the Earth Shrine Discord and check out the Elemental Shaman channel. That is where all the theory crafters like to go to share ideas. So other than that, guys, that's pretty much it. I hope you have a good one, and I will see you in the next video.